We live in an era that worships the loud, the visible, and the immediate. History is a ledger written in the ink of great battles, the declarations of emperors, and the clamor of public revolts. Our modern world demands that if you are not seen, you do not exist. If you are not heard, you have no influence. But what if the most significant revolution in the history of the human soul took place in a deafening 18-year silence? In the New Testament, there is a gaping void between the ages of 12 and 30. 18 years, over 6,000 days, are simply vanished. In a biography intended to change the course of eternity, nearly 90% of the subject's adult life is missing from a page. No miracles are recorded. No epic sermons are preached to thousands. No disciples follow in his wake. For nearly 2 decades, the word through which the universe was spoken into being lived a life so unremarkable, so deeply buried in the mundane, that the history books didn't think it was worth a single line. But we must understand, silence is never an absence. Silence is a presence. It is the dark soil where the root expands before the leaf can ever hope to touch the sun. Tonight, we aren't just peering into a gap in a timeline. We are stepping into the profound, crushing weight of those hidden years. We are asking the question that haunts every heart in a season of waiting. Why did the King of Kings choose a life of no reputation for twice as long as he chose a life of fame? Tonight, we walk in the shadows of Nazareth, where a man was forged not in the fire of the public eye, but in the slow, steady heat of the quiet. Our last glimpse of the child Jesus is a moment of pure, blinding intellectual lightning. Imagine the scene, the inner courts of the great temple, the nerve center of the Jewish world. Here stood the masters of the law, men who had spent 70 years dissecting every vowel of the Torah, men who held the religious destiny of a nation in their hands. And in their midst sat a 12-year-old boy. He wasn't merely a student. He was a revelation. He was engaging the greatest minds of his generation. And the text tells us they were utterly astounded. This wasn't just a child with a good memory. It was a child with a source. His questions were like keys turning in locks that had been frozen for centuries. His wisdom felt ancient, as if he had been present when the law was first etched into stone. This was his launch moment. This was the point where any prodigy would have been fast-tracked into the halls of power, perhaps groomed as the next great high priest. But look at what happens in the wake of this brilliance. He doesn't take his seat among the elite. He doesn't stay in the capital to build his brand. Instead, the voice that shook the elders falls silent to the world. He vanishes. He walks away from the golden gates of Jerusalem and heads toward the north, disappearing into the mist of the Galilee. The prodigy returned to the shadows, offering us our first and hardest lesson. That sometimes the most divine thing you can do after a moment of public success is to return to the secret place and continue to grow. He chose the slow road of maturity over the fast track of celebrity. The journey from the temple in Jerusalem to the streets of Nazareth was more than a geographic move. It was a psychological surrender. Jesus followed his parents back to a village so small, so culturally insignificant, that it didn't even appear on most contemporary maps. This was a place of mud, brick, and stone, where everyone knew your name and your father's name. Think of the internal transition this required. He moved from the seat of cosmic wisdom to the chores of a village household. He went from debating the mysteries of God to hauling water, sweeping floors, and gathering wood. He walked the same dusty, monotonous roads day after day, year after year. He shared crowded meals with brothers and sisters who likely found him strange, or perhaps just frustratingly ordinary. To the woman at the well, he was just a neighbor. To the children in the street, he was just the carpenter's lad. He became a part of the landscape, unnoticed, uncelebrated, and unexamined. While the great Roman Empire expanded its borders and the religious zealots whispered of revolution, the Son of God was choosing the ordinary. He was proving that the sacred is not found in a special location or on a special stage, but in the faithful heart. He wasn't performing for an audience. He was being formed by his Father. Inside him, a celestial transformation was taking place, but it was veiled by the coarsest of clothes and the most routine of duties. In Nazareth, he proved once and for all that you do not need a spotlight to be holy. For nearly 2 decades, the vast majority of his adult life, the hands that would one day heal the leper and eventually be pierced by Roman iron were covered in the grime of a common laborer. Jesus was a tekton. In the first century, this meant he was more than just a carpenter. He was a builder, a man of wood and stone, a craftsman who solved the physical problems of his village. Close your eyes and imagine the sensory reality of those 18 years. The sharp, sweet smell of fresh-cut cypress. The persistent, rhythmic thud of the hammer echoing in the small shop. The stinging, salty sweat in his eyes during the heat of a July afternoon. These were not holy moments in the way we usually define them, and yet they were the very fabric of his life. Year after year, he shaped the things that the world takes for granted. He built plows for the farmers to till the earth. He built tables for families to break bread upon. He built yokes for the oxen. In the grueling, repetitive nature of the workshop, he wasn't just killing time until his ministry began. He was leaning into the physical weight of what it means to be a human being. He learned the discipline of the craft, the way you must respect a grain of the wood or it will shatter. He learned the humility of serving a customer who might be difficult or demanding. Every stroke of the chisel was a form of prayer. He was learning how to wait until the wood was ready. He was learning how to find beauty in a raw, crooked branch. Long before he began the work of shaping the eternal destiny of the human race, he spent his youth honoring the dignity of labor. He didn't just inhabit a body, he put to work. He wasn't a king merely playing the part of a peasant. He was a creator rediscovering the beauty of the work of his own hands. We have been conditioned to believe that silence is a waste of time. We feel that if we aren't doing, we aren't becoming. But Jesus spent his youth teaching us a terrifyingly beautiful truth, that silence is the womb of destiny. The silence of these 18 years was not a punishment, nor was it a delay from a frustrated God. It was a rigorous, divine preparation. He did not rush the process. He didn't feel the modern anxiety to start his career by 21. He allowed the seasons of his life to turn at their own pace. He allowed the heavy rains of winter and the parched winds of summer to do their slow work on his spirit. In the stillness, he learned the voice of the Father so clearly that later, the roar of the crowds could never distract him. In the solitude of the hills around Nazareth, he found the resolve that would eventually carry him to the wilderness of temptation and the agony of Gethsemane. He wasn't waiting for his life to begin. He was living it to the absolute fullest in the secret place. These years stand as a monument for every person who feels stuck or hidden. Being hidden is often the greatest sign of God's intentionality. A skyscraper is only as stable as a foundation that is buried deep, dark, and invisible beneath the earth. His foundation was 18 years of silent strength. The scriptures provide us a small but staggering phrase. He increased in wisdom and in favor. Consider the implications. The one who created the human mind chose to subject himself to the slow, painstaking growth of a human mind. He didn't simply know things by divine magic. He studied. He spent his evenings in the dim light of an oil lamp, tracing the ancient scrolls of Isaiah, Hosea, and the Psalms until the words were more than just ink. They were his own internal heartbeat. He didn't just read the word. He breathed it. But his study wasn't confined to the synagogue. He was a master observer of the world his Father had made. When Jesus eventually stepped onto the stage of history, his mouth was full of stories. But where did those stories come from? He spoke of a woman losing a coin and sweeping the floor until she found it. He spoke of a shepherd searching the ravines for a single lost lamb. He spoke of the way seeds fall on different types of soil and how the mustard seed, the smallest of things, becomes a giant. He didn't find these parables in a library. He found them in his life. For 18 years, he was watching the farmers, the merchants, the widows, and the children. He was gathering the data of the human experience. By the time he stood on that mountain to say, "Blessed are the poor," he knew exactly what the dust on a poor man's sandals looked like. He had seen the reality before he ever preached the truth. The singular genius of the Christian story is that our God did not just visit us. He became one of us. And these hidden years were his internship in our suffering. Before he was a great physician, he was the great observer. He didn't just have theoretical knowledge of hunger. He felt the gnawing emptiness in his own stomach after a day where the pay was low. He didn't just understand loss as a concept. It is widely believed that he buried his earthly father, Joseph, during this time. He knew the taste of salt in a grieving man's tears. He knew what it felt like to be exhausted, his muscles aching from the weight of stones. He knew what it was like to be judged by self-righteous neighbors who thought he was nothing special. Because of these 18 years, Jesus possessed a quality more powerful than raw authority. He possessed empathy. When he eventually walked into a room of outcasts, they didn't see a distant ivory tower philosopher. They saw a man who looked like them, smelled like them, and understood the weight of their lives. His mission didn't start in a vacuum. It started from the ground up. He spent 18 years learning our language, our pain, and our quiet hopes, so that when he finally spoke, it felt like home was finally talking back to us. His silence made him the most approachable being in the universe. Finally, the cosmic clock struck the hour. The nearly 2 decades of Nazareth were over. The internal preparation had met the external moment. But look closely at the man who walks toward the Jordan River to meet John. He is not frantic. He isn't rushing. He isn't worried about whether his brand is ready for the public. The 18 years of anonymity had performed their perfect work. His mission had matured in the dark like a seed. In the silence, he had forged a clarity of purpose that no critic could shake and no crowd could inflate. He didn't need the world to tell him who he was, because he had heard the Father tell him who he was every day in the workshop and on the hillside. When the heavens finally opened and the voice cried out, "This is my beloved Son," it wasn't discovery for Jesus. It was a confirmation of a conversation that had been going on in the quiet for 18 years. He didn't need to become the Messiah in that moment. He simply stepped into the role he had been rehearsing in the secret of his heart for 20 years. The silence was his secret weapon. The hidden years were the bedrock of his power. The message of the hidden years is not just for scholars. It is for you. We live in a world that tells us that if our work isn't famous, it isn't significant. If our life isn't viral, it is a failure. But the carpenter from Nazareth shatters that lie. The 18 years tell us that God is obsessed with the process, not just the product. They tell us that God works in the dark. They tell us that your mundane job, your quiet service, your years of raising children, your long seasons of waiting, none of it is lost. Not a single hour of your obscure faithfulness is a waste in the eyes of the Father. Perhaps God is keeping you hidden right now because he is building a foundation in you that the public stage would eventually crush. He is shaping you in the quiet so that you can one day stand in the storm. The Nazareth seasons of our lives are not a detour. They are the destination. They are where we learn to be who we truly are before we are ever asked to lead. If you feel forgotten today, or if you feel like your potential is being swallowed by the ordinary, look to the workshop in Galilee. Do not rush the silence. Do not despise the mundane. Let the quiet build your character. Let the routine ground your heart. Let the hiddenness clarify your soul. You are not being delayed. You are being meticulously prepared for a purpose that only you, forged in the specific silence, can fulfill. The creator of the stars spent 18 years as a carpenter just to show you that every moment is a miracle. This is Silent Believer. May you find the strength to walk in the quiet and the grace to trust the hidden years. We'll see you in the silence.